go. So, just wanted to make a quick public service announcement before we get started. We have an instance where all this censorship online has now shown that even software that is connected to an online registration, the NVIDIA drivers themselves, are not very common yet. It's kind of like a insight to a possible issue that might show itself a bit more in the future. But I pose for anyone to take a look and be aware and report to any of your local content creators that deal with any sort of programming security, whatever, and make it known that there are some restrictions that are popping up for some users that are just trying to use their driver system. They're just trying to basically change settings on their own NVIDIA card. This was an individual that is named Dublain, and they're having an issue right here. I have to be 18 to use the NVIDIA app now. You are not eligible to use this application. Based on information we have, you do not meet our age requirements to access your own hardware settings. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. So it's not completely for sure yet. This is an instance that has happened once, at least for what we know. But this is the awareness aspect of knowing what to expect, and hopefully we can really get a good sort of grip on these events more. And make it known because all we can do is yell from the rooftops until we get all the information out and we get to understand what the heck is going on. But basically, I'm assuming, not on purpose, potentially, but I'm assuming that all this online child safety censorship that's happening online is somehow affecting the software. This person's not even from Britain or Australia or anywhere particular. Uh, so he mentions it somewhere in here, but it seems like it's a general configuration in the application that's trying to essentially take a look at the age of an individual based on their registration. And maybe you technically don't need a registration to use it, or at least certain tools. And when it comes to NVIDIA, especially the control panel. But if you're doing the bigger application, let's see what it's called. NVIDIA control panel is fine, but the NVIDIA app does potentially have a registration option that you can access through an account. And if you've made an account already and set up your settings, it may be restricting individual. Now it's updating. Great. It may be restricting individuals that have already plugged in their date of birth um, through their registration. Personally, I don't have a login. I don't like logging into these things, so there's nothing in my case to worry about. Most of us probably don't log into this stuff. But for those that use these login systems, I pose you to be very aware that anything that might be linked to an online interaction, like a registration, might be, might be basically connected to all the censorship that we're seeing. Anyway, that's it for this, at least for this case. We're going to go back to our programming. Probably a very quick one for today. So I'm going to bring out the workbench that we've set up for our JavaScript workbench. And if it loads up, would be nice. Let me grab our actual page here. So this is the page we've essentially started working on, and we're using it as a good baseline to learn programming, at least in JavaScript. Not only how pieces work, and based on previous videos that I've had, we have a bit of a 15% to go over for a bit until we get used to it. But in the process, we're going to be building something functional that we can use on a daily basis. And it looks like my Visual Studio Code's being a little bit of a crybaby right now. There we go. So here's everything we went over thus far in our application, our web app, if you will. We have a set of search sites that we're using as a reference so we can access specific searches quickly. These are just saved in a array where we can store as many as we'd like. At the end, I've put the index values so we can kind of get a good grasp of how programs in any computer is basically using these as reference to access certain parts. So this is the zero index, which is the very first item on the list, the first index, second item on the list, so on and so forth. And this is just how the computer thinks. So it's a good kind of reasoning concept to understand that anytime we use a basic array, without any keys or values. We're just forcing a index value set starting from zero and increasing by each item that is inside of that array. And we're using this to search sites. From there, we kind of globalize command arrays so we can take a look at some of the pieces inside when we're debugging. But as far as a global scope goes, we discussed scopes in detail last time. When it comes to the actual concept of what happens when I try to access this variable from a particular location. Right now, Command R is not defined. I haven't put anything in there. It's undefined. But if I put text in here and then I press the press me button, now command array is going to contain that exact set of strings that I've entered. Boom, just like so. This is how we pass passwords, usernames, all kinds of stuff through our JavaScript logic to basically either test for users that are logging in, if they're verified, and we normally do the verification process on a server, not on the client, because we don't want to pass any information that is, well, sensitive to the user, private data, directly through. We normally don't even save it into a variable because those can be intercepted in some way or fashion, especially if you have any sort of virus on your computer that will be able to basically keep track of the JavaScript processes. Not that it exists, not that I've seen, but in the end, it's still that level of security that we try to maintain. For this case, we're not really doing anything further but just taking the text, organizing it into an array, and then using that array to test specific commands and see what to do, what the program we wanted to activate based on those particular keywords. So we've got a set of command arrays right here. We're testing the first over and over and over. This is becoming a type of repetitive process. We can expand on it further with more advanced processes, especially with this case being replicable. We can put that in a function as well as we refactor the code to be a bit more organized and powerful. And we start to really find patterns in our code to basically supplement with some functions. Right now, I wanted to essentially go over a little bit on this little button here. This button, I have to click. Sometimes it takes too long. I want to activate a listener on top of this. So I can actually just press enter and get to the point to the next page. Well, there's a way we can do that. Right now, the button is basically being activated by the onClick function process here. We are saying when we click, this is the thing we want to run, the function that is connected to the name of the function down here. That's the connection here. When we press, we activate. But if I wanted to create an actual listener, I want to basically take first the ID of command button and attach that listener to it. So it's listening for keyboard strikes. And in this case, we basically want to grab first the document where our code is located in. We want to grab the get element by ID. And then from here, we want to grab the command button. Now, with this, we are essentially grabbing that piece of code that represents the button. And in our case, we want to attach a listener, which is a add event listener method that can be attached directly to that button. From here, we have some things to consider. The first thing is I basically want to activate this using a keyboard press. Let me see, on press? No, got to figure out what those specific listeners were. There's a bunch. So add event listener activators. You go in to the actual process of the documentation, and then we have types. So we're going to look at the types, which should be, let's see. Uh, Many times you don't. Okay, so we got an on click. We got a double click activator as well. Not necessarily what we want. Key down. That's the key word to use. So key down. And we do have some extra follow-ups we have to do as well. So on key down, we can do one of two things. We can actually create a function that will handle this, and then we can identify what key was pressed, or with a kind of trick in JavaScript, we can basically use a shortcut function. This is a function without a name, a function that can be placed basically anywhere in code. But for the simplicity of things, I'm going to go ahead and make a function called key press detect, like so. So this key press detect is going to serve as the function that activates when this particular key is, when any key is pressed really. It's the whole keyboard. And we want to pass an argument. We want to tell and pass the key that's currently being pressed. We're going to call it key, or the event in essence. In this case, this key will need to be passed over to the function. This is where one of those first cases we've done so far by understanding what happens inside of the regular parentheses when we pass attributes or details like variables from one to another. So this function is not really expecting anything right now. We have to make sure we actually throw in the key value so we can pass variable to variable. Now it can be a completely different key. It doesn't have to be the same variable. In fact, normally you see this as not key up here in the add event listener. You'll see it as a simple E for event. We can name this however. The important part is the add event listener is passing the key that's being pressed. With this keyword, it's detecting the keyboard and then telling our function what keyboard we're actually, or what keyboard key we're actually pressing down on. From there, we go a little bit further. We gotta take a look at that key and see what actually was pressed. So in that case, we have this capability. Just a switch, arrow up, arrow down, and other key values that we can use. But in our case, this is really where the part is necessary to understand. We are, where are we? Oh, it just kind of flipped me around real quick. Hold on. There we are. So we are now creating the function, this method. And in this case, it's creating a class. So we're simplifying the process. I'm not going to use a whole class for this. I'm just going to be basically using the um, algorithm necessary to make this happen. So from here, we pass the E for event, and then E for event goes inside of the function. Then we run that function, which will parse through the keys that we are pressing, and then actually provide um, the specific action we want, right? This is how we'll basically take it. We can use a switch. That is a pretty proper case for this. Or we can use an if. It's, for me personally, just a very much quicker way to do this. So I'm going to do key.code equals enter. Now, I believe this is the case, but we'll have to do a double check. We'll do an alert and press enter just to check that we have the correct set of values set up. I'll save this, refresh, and press enter. Nope. Reading.code cannot read property of undefined code, key code. All right, so this might be a case for old versions, E. What about E? What if I just do E? Maybe it is an actual preset variable that we have to use in order to access. E is not defined. Fine. Let's see. Key reference uncaught. Right. E event this register. E.code. Some method. Let's see. Add event listener. We just have to use a simplified version of this. Key down values. Function pass through. So let's do this one. I like that one. W3 schools is very nice. On key down, on key press. Oh, it gave me the wrong values. So on key press. We don't care so much about the up and down. We want the whole press to function. So potentially this is going to adjust the variable being accessed. Let's see, on key E is not defined. Still a reference error. My script object on key down. We can also do it in a different way. Key down. Okay. No. My script. Okay, hold on. Is this a case where I don't need this? I just need the function name. Key down, key press. Ah, there we go. Okay, so key press and then the function without the actual parentheses. There is a specific adjustment we have to make when we're trying to reference one function to another. So add event listener is essentially a function in itself, and it's trying to use another function within its parameters. With that, we have to neglect the parentheses after key press detect. This is simply because the parenthesis is the activator. This actually runs the function specifically. However, if we're trying to reference that function, we use it without parentheses and reference that function as an actual variable inside of that parameter. So now the key press on our add event listener will let us enter, or should let us press the enter button. Not yet. Okay. Let's see. Potentially, let me see a alert key. Let's see if it's detecting the key. I might have to actually use nope, a uppercase, but that's not even grabbing the details. Let's see. Maybe I do have to use that function. There is also the on key down, on key up. You can attach those to a function, but I want to let JavaScript manage that for me. Through the add event listener key press, my script, on key up, my function, on key up, add event listener key up, my script. Let's see here. Add event listener key up my function. My function then basically runs there. Yeah, so they're not using the parentheses for this function. So maybe just a case of key up. Still not activating. Key press detect, command, but oh wait. Do I care to actually? Oh, wait. I need to do it within this location. Okay, hold on. I had my logic a little backwards. I have to actually press enter when I'm focused in on the input, not the command button. So I should actually be using user input as my input button location or the place I want to actually press enter. I'm going to save that. Now I actually have to be clicked inside of here and then I press enter and there we go. All right. So now we have at least a case for the enter button being activated and we see the alert pop up. However, this is probably where I need to use an uppercase E here to activate the actual enter inside of the if statement so it can catch it correctly. Pressed enter. There we go. So uppercase key code. And from here, we can use this to basically filter out every single key on the keyboard. It's a good, powerful tool to basically create keyboard-based interactions in your page or on the particular input specifically. Now we can technically also do document dot add event listener. We can add this event listener everywhere. Literally just by entering this document and focusing on the window, we can press enter and still achieve the same factor. But since we're kind of trying to focus in on that particular, well, detail of how I want to type something, like, okay, keyboard event. Oh, right. Okay, so I'm actually constantly calling the alert key every time a key is pressed. I'm not going to remove this because the function is going to run every time you actually type something in. That's kind of the key idea here, no pun intended. The actual keys on the keyboard will be activated every time you press it, which will now run this function, and it'll now, in our case, only run when I want to press enter. Well, actually, here, what I want to do is not just alert the user they pressed enter. I want to activate the button click function because that sets up everything else for the rest of our searching process. This is our Google search, our YouTube search, our DuckDuckGo, basically the same function that we've set up to activate and work with the details in between Well, this is the function that has to be called when we press enter. Even though it says button click, that was the initial logic behind it. I'm just going to activate button click in the enter. So it serves the exact same purpose. By pressing enter or by clicking the button, they both go to the same block of code. Save that, refresh. Now I can do a G cats and hats and press enter. Now it functions exactly as we hoped. So we don't have to generally constantly press the button, the key press, which kind of like kills the actual need for having the button. But hey, having a button is always a good thing. But for our case, we're essentially just taking this through. We can press the button or press enter and it'll serve the same purpose. I can go to YouTube now, press enter, there we go. Both opening in new tabs, so I don't have to essentially constantly go backwards. There we go. So that's one of the big pieces now that we have a event listener. This is very prominent in a lot of languages, especially gaming development. Being able to control certain aspects of your game, character moving, and other factors that make the game usable through this sort of key press detection. We can do a click detection, but in this case, we're doing a keyboard detection, checking the key code for enter, which now activates the function that we have previously programmed to get our actual search process going. So in this workbench, we've essentially, it's a little messy. It looks a little messy when it gets tiny, but we've essentially created a kind of little workbench tool that we can now parse the internet through in a single page and fully kind of control it through just the keyboard or the mouse or further as we continue growing it. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And that's all I wanted to do for now, but also let me see, I kind of wanted to organize and refactor some of this code. So we've got a function for actually searching and setting up our searching process or string. I had an issue with this where now I'm trying to search for Yahoo Finance and it's not quite doing the right thing. So if I actually go to YF for Yahoo Finance and look for Microsoft, I'm having a bit of an issue with the way I'm formatting my URL string. I'm putting a plus at the end, even though I shouldn't really be doing that. Now it doesn't know what I'm saying because it's looking for Microsoft Plus instead of just Microsoft. This is because I'm adding a plus at the end of every single string of characters that I'm looping through for our search. What I should be doing in a nice and clean way is actually checking to see if we have the very first case scenario, or at least if we're not in the very last loop, we don't want to add this plus at the very end. We only want to add it between characters, between the search terms that we display in our actual piece here. So the space again is our split. All of these processes were shown in previous videos, so make sure to like and subscribe and check out the other videos on how we got to this point. This is an ongoing project that we will continue to expand on and will help you learn programming and how to basically make it applicable to your projects in the future. So in this case here, I have a plus at the end to basically work with the requirements of Google search. Google search, in our case, if I do G, press me, you'll see there it is. It's at the end here, the MSF plus. The plus is basically here for if I'm trying to look for multiple words, which shouldn't exist if I'm doing only one. So cat and hat, since it's three words, I have to add a plus in between all of these words because in the URL you cannot include spaces. Spaces break the URL value. In my case, I want to adjust this a little bit and clean it up. What I want to do then is check for what part of my loop I'm going through. And as long as I'm not at the very end loop or the final loop, which will be the command R length -1, then I will not add in this plus at the end. So I'm going to remove this for now. It's going to remove our pluses for the case scenario. And I'm going to check in a little loop that says, hey, if I is less or equal to command R length, so this would be the total length, which would be a basic full amount of counting of the length of our array. Now, because we start at 0 on a computer basis, we have to basically alter this with a -1. If we're counting by 0 starting point, we're always going to fall short by 1 at the end of our loop. So I'm going to say if I'm at the very end here, or even, not even that, if I'm not at the very end, we're going to add our plus. So we're going to say search terms equals to search terms plus, well, plus without the actual quotes just means the addition of another string. Plus with the quotes means I'm going to place the string at the end here. So this is just like a glue. If we see a white plus here, like here, these are glues that are connecting two different keywords together, literally like glue stacking them next to each other. However, in the orange, we have ourselves an actual string that represents the character plus. That's what's going to be glued at the end of our current search term process. Now, when we get to the very last loop, the very last keyword in our search, we should not have a extra plus at the end like we do up here. This will clean it up for us so it's actually more universally usable between different websites. So here, it didn't really matter for Google because they didn't really count that plus, but because with the Yahoo Finance issue, that's where I want to clean up that one little set of code. So now, if I refresh, I'm going to G cat in the hat, press. There we go. We have pluses all the way through. Oh, hat in the hat. Sure. Right. Good enough. We have all the pluses we want. However, there's no plus at the end. That's because this is stopping it from actually running the last plus attachment. Now I can go back, take this as Yahoo Finance, and then now we can just look up like Apple or something. Now we get a direct link to the Apple location without that weird formatting issue we had earlier. Now, we've basically created ourselves a little tool that can go all over the internet and do different factors, different searches, different tools that we can access directly without having to go there, without having to click and search. Basically, go there once, set up the code, and then you can do this over and over from the comfort of your own little workbench. That's it for now. Just wanted to check out how the actual stream's gonna do. Looks like it's pretty slow today, or at least at this time. So I'm just kind of checking time values, seeing how it actually is during this time for any streams. But I'm gonna give it a little bit more and see if there's any interactions happening here. If there's anybody that joins in, stays, and actually asks some questions. Otherwise, the time for these streams here doesn't seem like it's very useful. I like to do my streams a lot earlier anyway. Normally I stream around the noon time, before noon really, on the east coast of US. So those timelines is when I have my office streams. I know we go over programming, we go over building computers, AI, all kinds of factors. And yeah, looks like people are just kind of dropping off real quick. Say something if you're in, if you want me to continue right now. Otherwise, I'm gonna be basically done. Want to see if anyone is still here at this time. Maybe programming's not the kind of language or kind of stream we want at this time. Maybe everyone's waking up with coffee and looking to program. It's a very interesting phenomena. Mm. Anyway, for more programming, guys, make sure you like, subscribe, notifications on. I try to do these daily. Sometimes I'll drop in and out from different subjects, anything tech related, and that's it. I will talk to you later.